Today I want to talk about two books that you probably have not heard of. And it's kind of a risk to do this given the low number of views I've been getting lately, but we're going to do it anyway. I just want to put that caveat out there. This is going to be a book you've never heard of. You'll know that from the thumbnail. But I think if you like any of the books that I have done reviews on, I think you'll like these books and I recommend checking them out. They were fantastic, kind of feminist leaning literature that had spookier vibes, more towards the literary horror type element to it, and I just really want to talk about them because I think they were really great, and I just finished them and they recently came out from also a small press publisher, and I think it is great to also support small press publishers. So I have a couple of reasons why I want to talk about these books. I also need to give you a warning here that Hugin believes it is his dinner time. His dinner time is not for an hour and a half, so there may be little squeaks in the background. If you hear a bird, a mouse, a squeaky wheel, it's my dog. He thinks it's dinner time. But if I feed him now, he will be waking me up at 4 o'clock in the morning for breakfast, so he's waiting until his dinner time. So we just have the old man determination to make the rules that we just have to deal with. So these two books I both got from ECW Press in Canada, and they are the same publisher that did Grey Dog by Elliot Gish last year. I loved this book. I gave it really high ratings, and I gushed about it all last year. I love this book. I want to do a reread soon. I loved it because it's coming up on 2 years since I read it. So which is crazy to me that this came out, that I read this in January of 2024, and that is almost 2 years ago. That's wild. So they emailed me in the middle of this year, and they were like, hey, we have 2 new books coming out. Do you want an advanced copy? They emailed me through NetGalley, and I was like, you know what? Sure. So the first one, I can't remember which one they emailed me about first, but I ended up taking both of them, even though I wasn't going to do arcs this year. But they sounded really good. So the first one is Veal. I grabbed the laptop so I could tell you what they pitched this to me as that made me interested. First, I saw the cover, which is really interesting, kind of a negative. There we go. It's a negative coloration with the doll parts. And I was like, what is happening here? And then it said it was the atmosphere of Twin Peaks. And I was like, oh, Twin Peaks. Okay. I really enjoyed Twin Peaks. I don't think this is the same as that show at all, but the atmosphere I think is fairly accurate. Twin Peaks though is a little Pacific Northwestern-y, and I've been looking for Pacific Northwestern Gothic, like Twin Peaks, like Midnight Mass. I have not found one yet. This was actually set on the East Coast, but it did have those vibes, except for we had sticky summer followed by rainy fall, and I do think that the blend between the two was kind of abrupt. There wasn't it was just kind of abrupt, which maybe that's what summer into fall on the East Coast is like. I don't know. I've never lived on the East Coast. So we follow a group of 4 women, largely, in Veal. And really, the book is mainly about them kind of unpacking their trauma from their lives through a very traumatic experience that happened. So Lawrence, also called Dell, her name is Dolores Lawrence Franklin. She goes by Lawrence mostly. She basically has mommy issues, essentially. Her mom wanted her to be something specific, and she never could be that. Her mom expected her to grow up, get a good job, get married, have that type of standard heteronormative compet life. And Lawrence didn't identify with that at all. She knew she was into women from a very young age, and her mom immediately told her that her being gay would start the apocalypse when she found out when she was 10 years old. So she had this hanging over her head that her identity and her love of people that was not what her mother expected or wanted was this big, looming, dangerous thing. She never rejected it because of that, but she always knew her mom rejected her because of that. So she's kind of grown up with that, but she felt the urge to try to put herself in this box so that her mom would accept her. It was never enough. Her mom never accepted her. And after days and days and months of living this life, she couldn't handle it anymore, and she spiraled into this depressive state. She's only 24, 25, very young. And she basically used 6 months of PTO, spent mental health days, and decided, you know what, we're gonna go back to school. And she picked somewhere on the other side of the country from her parents, and that was this small town. She got her best friend to come with her, and her best friend, I can't remember her name right now, Stacia. It's Anastasia, so it's Stacia or Stasia, maybe. It's Anastasia or Anastasia, don't know. But her friend She drug her with her, and her friend was dealing with her own stuff as well. Her friend is also into women, but tried to suppress it because of religious trauma from her mother and her family. But she's trying to still have that bond with her family because she's kind of internalized a lot of that. She's also internalized the submission to the patriarchy, where she's a STEM person. She's now going to grad school with Lawrence as well. They're both in grad school, and Stacia is dealing with the fact that like this man in her lab is very openly misogynistic. He is the head of the lab. Her PI, her supervisor, her advisor, whatever you call him in your neck of the woods, is very openly misogynistic and blames her and the other woman in the lab for everything, and just like holds up the men in the lab. And Stacia gets really upset about the other girl fighting against that, because she's like, if she just went along with it, everything would be fine. If she just went along with it, everything would be fine. So we know that something's going to happen with that as the book goes on. Lawrence, after being there for a couple of weeks, decides she needs a job. She hires on at this arcade as a bookkeeper. And the arcade is run by a member of the town who everyone knows, but Lawrence doesn't know why. She's new to this small town as well. And that is Frankie. And it's a whole funny thing, because her name is Franklin Dolores, and our main character's name is Dolores Franklin. And so it's this kind of joke between them. So Frankie owns this arcade, and we find out eventually, as Lawrence finds it out, that she was the center of these brutal murders in this small town. And Lawrence kind of knew about the murders, but they were always at the back of her mind. She's never been to true crime. That's kind of brought up. But she goes to the small town because everything's over. They caught the guy. So the guy that they caught was Frankie's dad. And Frankie seems to she doesn't want to talk about it. And Frankie is also missing her arm from like the elbow down. And this guy's whole thing was to take women apart. His name is Frank, and so they called him Frankenstein. So we have these kind of allusions somewhat throughout the book to Frankenstein. However, we kind of are much more like on the nose with it, about like it's hatred of women that makes men do these things. And I didn't hate that aspect of it at all. I think while it may have been heavy-handed, it had a lot of good thoughts, and it might have been up in your face, but you could feel the rage. It was up in your face because it was rageful at these things. Our last main character is Pippa, who is really good friends with Frankie. She's the only one who's stuck by Frankie. She is also othered. All 4 of these women are lesbians. She's also othered because she's Native, and she's been dealing with that her whole life. And her cousin was actually one of the first few victims of Frankie's father. And so despite that, she is still stuck by Frankie because she knows it's not her fault. She was one of his victims as well, and Frankie had been trying to tell everyone her whole life about her dad. And nobody ever listened to her but he's just such a good man. And so we talk a lot about how people in community react when men get found out to have done these things, and how they always look for a scapegoat. And the scapegoat in this book was Frankie's mom. They blamed her for it. And we do get information on her mom and why her mom was blamed by these people and all these things. Essentially what starts happening is there's a monster in the town, and Frankie is convinced that it was actually the monster that did these things, not her dad. So she's trying to hunt this monster while more murders are happening. And so everyone's trying to figure out if it's a copycat or if they caught the wrong guy, because these are very similar. But disappearances and murders start happening. And Frankie is convinced that it's this monster and they have to catch it. And other members of the group start seeing this monster while nobody around them believes them. So we have this kind of like monster chase happening while we're dealing with all of these in-depth trauma things that everyone has from growing up. And mostly it's told in this series of like little almost vignettes, little moments of slice of life things. It's the girls hanging out and maybe discussing monster hunting, but it's them becoming friends and getting to know each other and being each other's support systems. And it's Lawrence dealing with grad school and her emotional trauma with her mother and her depression and her fighting through that and trying not to get swallowed by it again and pulling herself out and trying to be a good friend. And it's Stacia dealing with her lab mates and all of that stuff, and while also becoming friends with the rest of these women. So we kind of follow them along as they get drug along by Frankie hunting this monster, and Lawrence is falling in love with her throughout it. So I think it had really good things to say about trauma and how we process it in the different ways, because everyone in this story is processing things differently. But a lot of it too is discussing the unpacking the misogyny that our mothers give us. And there was a lot of that in the book, and I identified with so many of the different ways that these women moms treated them, and I had bits and pieces of all of it in my own life. So it was really kind of like therapeutic for me to read through it at the same time as dealing with like, I've had my own journey of unpacking my own internalized misogyny from the things that I experienced from the way that my mom talked about women and teenage girls and things like that when I was a kid, and how hard it was for me to unpack that. I was very much aligned with a lot of Stacia's like stuff that she was dealing with in the moment, and stuff that Frankie was like, or Lawrence was like, why haven't you dealt with this? I dealt with this so many years ago. Why haven't you dealt with this yet? And I could understand her frustration as well, because it's how I look at other people who are my age and haven't unpacked it yet and are still talking about the vapidness of teenage girls and how they're catty and backstabby and all of this stuff, and like, oh, like you put on this type of clothing to try to like fit in, and then they're gonna backstab you or whatever. And this is it's all because of the patriarchy, and it's all because of how men view women and how men put these labels on that then gets like held up by women who are continuing that to try to survive it. And there's a lot of those types of conversations in it that I found really cathartic to read them again after having like gone through that, and still I'm constantly working to unpack my internalized misogyny. And so that was a really interesting aspect of it. If you like books that are a little more literary type horror, there's a couple of like horrific scenes that happen in here. Nothing too brutal really, like we don't actually see any of the dismemberings. There's some gore and there's some being chased by these monsters. But if you like literary explorations of philosophical societal things, I think this is one that you'll probably like. Had to send the dog upstairs. He'll probably come back down in a minute, but he was starting to like do things to be very loud. I was like, okay, time to go upstairs. So, but we're gonna talk about the next book, which is The Witch of Willow Sound. I didn't like this one as much as I liked Veal, but I still enjoyed it, and I still think it was a good book. I believe this one is also a debut. I think these are both debuts, and I liked this one too. So The Witch of Willow Sound is set in Nova Scotia, which makes sense. ECW Press is a Canadian press. And this is the one that said it was Our Wives Under the Sea. I actually don't think I can see it, because Our Wives Under the Sea is very atmospheric. It's very much about grief and loss, and maybe with the grief aspect, but I don't think there's anything in here that feels very Our Wives Under the Sea, which was disappointing because I really liked Our Wives Under the Sea. They also comped it to the Once and Future Witches, and I didn't see anything that I would say is the Once and Future Witches either. But we are dealing with grief and loss and witches, so in generational trauma. But I don't think those are good comps for this book. And I think that might be where it's lost people. It does say it's a feminist gothic tale, and it is gothic. It does feel very gothic, but it has more kind of levity to it, I think, than a lot of gothic books that I've read do. Here comes the dog. We're gonna give him a second. The Witch of Willow Sound. This one, I've charged this light. Okay, we're just gonna have bad lighting the rest of the video, I'm sorry. I need to figure out something else to do with lights. This is back when Goodreads would call things chick-lit. I think they would probably call this that. Both of these, to be fair, probably could fit into that category. I would say these are both like women's literature. The Witch of Willow Sound is tagged as a romance, and it is not. So Storygraph has it as literary, mystery, and romance. It is not. I may like send an email. There's no romance in this book. That's annoying. There's no romance in this book at all. The Witch of Willow Sound follows Fade, which is short for Phaedra. And I was like, oh, a Phaedra. Because I really loved Kushiel's Dart. And I don't see that name very often. So we're following Fade. Fade starts off with her waking up in a graveyard, and she's sleeping rough. And we find out that she is homeless after spending quite a long time investigating cyber crimes, and she was on the child victims unit, so you know what she was dealing with. And essentially she couldn't handle it anymore. She just had a like mental breakdown and walked out of the office. She blacked out for a few days, and she basically just left her whole life behind. So she doesn't have anything. She's sleeping in her car. She has a few things. She's estranged from her mom, which is why it's weird when her mom calls her to say, I need you to go check on your aunt. There's only 2 of us that know the road to her place, and you're one of the 2. And I need you to go check on her because I have to fly there to get there. And according to the cop, she's gone missing. Fade doesn't think that sounds like her aunt, though she doesn't she doesn't remember much of her aunt. The last time she saw her, she was like 8 or 9 years old, maybe a little bit younger. But yet she like has this very clear idea of who her aunt is. And so we have this kind of, it ends up feeling a bit inconsistent on that, because she's like, oh, I don't remember. But then she's like, that's not my aunt. Like, do you remember or do you not remember? Like, and I get it, because we're in this like kind of high stress situation. And also Fade is not emotionally stable. And she admits that a few times. But so she goes and she looks, and what she finds is a cop, a Mountie, I believe, called Quill. Quill is not interested in Fade's nonsense. Fade is not interested in giving Quill any information. And so we end up with the two kind of like butting heads throughout the story, even though they don't see each other very often. Fade, as soon as the cop leaves, decides that she's gonna like go into town and try to find some information. The timelines on all of these things are a bit fuzzy sometimes, but I let it go. She ends up getting told to go by like a woman who owns a little general store, is like, go talk to the archivist. I think he'll have some information for you, because she needs to find a picture of her aunt for the case file so they can announce her as a missing person, because there is no existing pictures of her aunt really. So she talks to the archivist to see if he could find one. And he's this kind of eccentric British man who is there on a like research grant, and he's researching this town, which is called Grand T, which is sitting under this rock that is like shaped like a teapot that is like teetering basically, and looks like it could fall at any point in time. Our author says that it's not based on a real area, but based on the large rock formations around Nova Scotia that do look to her like they could fall at any time, and the little towns that are like underneath them. Her aunt lives like just above the town on the edge of a cliff as well. So the aunt is known as, and she finds out throughout the town that she's viewed as a witch, and she's been ostracized. They blame her for things. They think she's going to be the downfall of the town. All of this like horrible rumors and stuff. And so the archivist kind of tells her a bit about history of witches in the area and how they didn't actually used to burn them and all of these like kind of things. And he's very excited to have met someone who was related to the Witch of Willow Sound, because his special interest is witches and how history portrays them and how they're not exactly how they have been portrayed. So he's really excited to meet her. They end up kind of becoming friends, and they start trying to solve the mystery of what happened to Madeline Luck, which is Fade's aunt's name. And what they do start to uncover is this whole kind of conspiracy by Madeline's family, who were fairly wealthy at the time, and how they worked with one of the local mental institutions, which were called asylums at the time, to take the bodies of the dead that from that asylum and bury them on their property. So they end up uncovering all of this. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but you start to see it as soon as we start talking about it. You're like, oh, okay, I know what's going on. So essentially we start to try to uncover that. We try to figure out the mystery of where Madeline is, and it's very clear what's happening. Like, it's very clear. Nothing in this book really surprised me throughout it. Essentially, we end up kind of going through this whole romp, and Fade was like the most frustrating character, but I also understood why she was the way that she was. But she was stubborn to her own fault, and I did like that she had consequences for her stubbornness in a lot of different cases. I think the archivist Nish was actually a really good character. He was really enjoyable. I liked having him there. I think he added something to the story. He added some levity that Fade didn't have. I will say, the dialogue in here is very rough, but I think once you like settle in, you're like, that's just how it's gonna be. The story itself is pretty good, and I enjoyed it. The dialogue, though, is very difficult. We use the word frig a lot, like, what the frig, this friggin' thing. Like, and I was like, okay, this is just how this person talks. It's a quirk. She's unstable. We'll just let it go. And the author says that this was a lot inspired by the small little villages in Nova Scotia that she grew up around, and all of the kind of buried history of Canada. And specifically, like, she talks about these asylums who used to actually do this, like hide the fact that people died. And she also talks about the Indigenous children who were taken to these boarding schools, same as they were here in the US, and all of the horrific things that have been covered about those. I think the 60s Scoop is what it's called in Canada, and all of those things. And so all of these different histories and how people were treated, how people who were outcasts of society have been treated by society over the times, and what society has done with those people. I think it was a little bit rough on the way that it did do that, but I think it had something worth hearing. I think what it was talking about was worth listening to. I did like the writing style. I thought it was quick and it was easy to read, and it was kind of humorous at times. And I think it had a good balance of the way the information was given without feeling like an information dump at the same time as giving enough background information to understand what was going on. It did feel like conversations between people. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like Fade didn't know things just so that we could be told them. It felt like she actually genuinely didn't know and was having a conversation with someone who is info dumping in the fact that this is their special interest. And they're like, let me tell you about this. Like, this is my favorite thing to talk about. We didn't have big paragraphs, but we would have a dialogue about it. And I think that was kind of worth it, even though the dialogue, like I said, was a bit cheesy at times, but I did really like it. It felt a little found family. We had some intergenerational trauma with Fade and her mother and them not getting along. We didn't really unpack it a lot, which I think was fine. And it had a nice, sweet ending too. I think I liked the ending a lot, and I liked how we talked about how we preserve the things that are important to us. So I think if you like things like that, I'm trying to think of things that it might actually be like, and I'm coming up a little bit short. I do think both of these things have similar elements to Grey Dog in the way that they are very slow in the big thing to happen. Like, we take some time to get there. We have a lot of slice of life-y type things. I think with Fade, her trying to uncover the mysteries a little faster. She does come to conclusions pretty quick, but she struggles a lot to get there. And I did like that even though she's an intelligent character, it still takes her a moment to figure things out sometimes. And I really appreciated that aspect of it. So both of these have really cool covers too. The Witch of Willow Sound got me because I love this cover so much. I don't think it really has anything to do with the book itself, but I did like the cover. So if you read either of these, let me know what your thoughts on them are. So hopefully somewhere between these two books, you have something that you didn't know about that sounds interesting to you for you to go check out from a small press and from some debut authors that are fairly different than things that I've been reading the rest of the year. So if you do check these out, please let me know what you think. Come back to this video, tell me if you've read them, definitely let me know. And I will see you soon with something else.